Hello, everybody. I'm Kenny McReynolds from Waggle Broadcasting. Have a great group of experts today. Jay Cohen from Associated Press, Maddie Lee of the Chicago Sun-Times, and John Greenberg of The Athletic. Maddie, let's start with you. The Cubs in a playoff push. If the season ended today, they would be in the playoffs. But Stroman, with a weird injury, how would this affect that playoff push?
Yeah, I think the hard part is just the question marks around the timeline. They're waiting until he's symptom-free to get him back into baseball activities. He doesn't know when that's going to be. Cubs don't know when that's going to be. And so it could be the rest of the season. It could be a couple weeks. We don't know. If they could get him back for at least the playoffs, that would be huge. But we have no idea at this point.
Yeah, he made this impromptu visit to the press box, which I can't remember ever happening I've been around there for 20 years. I don't remember a player coming up to give us a press conference like spring training during a game. It was very odd. And he said he really doesn't sound like he can do anything for a few weeks. He said he has trouble turning right now. That didn't sound great.
Not for a pitcher.
You do need to do that to pitch, it turns out.
Right, like this. He needs a swivel chair. So it doesn't sound great right now. If you need a few weeks to even do anything, the timeline, the schedule, doesn't really allow for a lot of leeway that way. So I think the Cubs have to be operating from he's out for the season.
It's an injury I'd never heard of.
Fractured rib cartilage.
Yeah, I mean, how do you do that?
I don't know. and that's the thing. We haven't gotten any answers from him or from the team on exactly how it happened. They've all said, we're not sure either. And so, the tough part is, when we're talking about timeline, if it was an arm injury, you'd have some frame of reference, right? But for cracked rib cartilage, we just have no idea how that's going to affect him. No.
It's just not a pitching injury, and that's why, obviously he said he doesn't know, they said they don't know. I think, some of us that have covered baseball long enough are skeptical when we hear about injuries. No one can explain, whether a guy's washing his car or something like that. He didn't offer any of those fake explanations. I'm just saying it definitely makes us conspiracy theorists amongst us reporters, wonder how this happened.
Especially you, right?
No, there's other ones in that press box that are more conspiracy-minded than me.
I will say for the Cubs, though, I think if anything, so far this division has shown that nobody's pulling away from anybody. The wild card race is really muddled. Yeah. I think there's certainly a plausible way you could describe a scenario where the Cubs are able to get into the playoffs without him pitching the rest of the year, just because the other two or three teams that they're fighting with for these two spots, the division and the wild card, are not very good. It's just basically it's going to come down to the last few days, essentially.
So you think they have enough firepower?
Sure. Well, I think it's not as much how much firepower I have as much as the other teams they're competing against don't have any sort of significant advantage over them without Stroman.
Well, True Smiley starts Tuesday in Detroit, so that's going to be a game I think everyone's going to be watching. The ratings on Marquee should be quite high for a Cubs-Tigers game on a Tuesday night, because that's a huge game. To see how he's going to pitch, right?
Right, yeah. He has not been himself. He started out the season great, but it's just been, for the last couple months, it's been, they like the progress that he's making in between starts, but it's just not showing up as results on the field. And so they hoped that maybe, a little bit of that break, going to the bullpen, being able to work on stuff, and maybe even the mentality of being a reliever would help jolt him back into where he was at the beginning of the season.
Well, and I think, too, they can afford to keep him on a short leash with Hayden Wisniewski there. I don't think it's they're going to let Smiley have a shot at this, but I don't think his leash is very long. If this gets to a scenario where how he has been pitching, they could go to Hayden or take a look at some other options. If Ben Brown gets back and gets healthy, that I think that's something they're probably willing to consider. So, it's an important start for them, but I don't know if it's a do or die thing.
Do you bring somebody up September to help?
We don't get as much leeway anymore.
I know you're going to bring two.
Right.
But one pitcher.
You would think one would be a pitcher.
Yeah.
Yeah, although at this point you're probably looking at some bullpen help
Right.
as opposed to starting rotation. The good news for them is that they have played well while Stroman has either been out or struggling,
Right.
either due to mechanics or injury or a combination of both. But the offense has been really carrying them. And Javier Assad. Javier Assad has pitched really well in his stead. But the offense really clicking has been able to get them through that. So they need to keep that consistency through the stretch.
And they just don't have a cushion. That's the problem.
Yeah.
There's no cushion here. Like, yeah, you can say like you don't think the Brewers or Reds are very good, but Brewers are leading them right now, and the Reds keep are still tied with them, and they got to play Milwaukee and Cincinnati after this like stretch of kind of losing teams.
And the Diamondbacks are charging.
That's
They've
true.
won 5 out of the last 6.
This is just, I mean, again, this is all going to come down to the last couple of days. But, I mean, in terms of, like, the September arm, they could choose a bullpen arm with some length. It's just going to increase the pressure on the rest of the rotation because they can use that 5th slot and say, okay, if Smiley or Wisniewski struggles, go to the guy they bring up and get that length and kind of manage that game. But they're counting on the other 4 guys to provide length at that point because when you have multiple slots where you need length behind the starter, you're in a whole lot of trouble.
Yeah, I mean they finish up in Milwaukee, right? Isn't that what it is?
Yeah.
You got at
Atlanta, then Milwaukee.
At Milwaukee. That's a heck of a closing stretch. I mean, this is actually, if you look at the way the Cubs finish in this next month, it's going to be a lot of fun. Like, there's not a lot of I mean, there's some games against bad teams, whatever, but every game really counts.
Well, yeah, right now Kansas City's a bad team, Detroit's a bad team, Pittsburgh's a bad team.
They're 2-2 in the stretch, so they're not.
Well, you're also getting to that area where it happens every time of year. We've all seen it. You also get in that point where, one team's playing with something to play for, and one team doesn't have anything to play for. It's often quite easier just to swing away with the team with nothing to play for than the other team is playing. And you're going to see that. You've seen that with the Cubs in the short term right now, and you'll see it more in September with these teams like the Reds, the Cubs, and stuff like that, who maybe don't have a disparate level of talent, and they're playing teams that have nothing to lose, and they're just playing loose and free, just like the Cubs did at the end of last year, and Jed talked about in the offseason, where he's like, I don't know how much you can put into the way the Cubs played at the end of last year because they had nothing to play for.
Well, they may not have anything to play for. The Bears didn't really have anything to play for yesterday in their second preseason game. We'll talk about that when the Reporters continues.